Great Expectations is a novel by Charles Dickens that tells the life story of Philip Pirrip, known as Pip. Pip is a young orphan boy living with his older sister, Mrs. Joe Gargery, and her kind-hearted husband, Joe Gargery, in a small village on the marshes of Kent, England. Mrs. Joe is a stern and often harsh woman who raises Pip by hand and she disciplines him strictly. Joe, on the other hand, is gentle and treats Pip with love and care. Joe works as the village blacksmith, and Pip often helps him at the forge. One day, Pip visits the graves of his parents in the churchyard. As he sits alone, an escaped convict suddenly appears from behind the gravestones. The man is dirty, shivering, and in irons. He threatens Pip, demanding that he bring him food and a file to remove his shackles. Frightened, Pip agrees and rushes home. Despite his fear of his sister's anger, Pip steals some food and a file from Joe's tools. Early the next morning, he brings these items to the convict, whose name is Abel Magwitch. Magwitch devours the food and uses the file to begin sawing off his leg irons. He thanks Pip but warns him to keep quiet about their meeting. Shortly after, soldiers arrive at Pip's home, seeking assistance in capturing two escaped convicts. They request that Joe repair some handcuffs. Pip is terrified, thinking he will be punished for helping Magwitch. Joe and Pip accompany the soldiers into the marshes, where they find Magwitch fighting with another convict, Compeyson. Both men are captured. Magwitch protects Pip by claiming he stole the food and file himself, ensuring that Pip's involvement remains a secret. Life returns to normal, and Pip continues to assist Joe at the forge. One day, he is unexpectedly invited to visit Miss Havisham, a wealthy and reclusive woman who lives in a grand but dilapidated mansion called Satis House. Miss Havisham is an eccentric figure. Years ago, she was abandoned by her fiancé on her wedding day. Devastated, she stopped all the clocks in her house at the exact moment she received the letter breaking off the engagement, 20 minutes to 9. She continues to wear her old wedding dress, now yellowed and decaying, and has left the wedding feast untouched on the table, where it has rotted over time. At Satis House, Pip meets Estella, Miss Havisham's beautiful adopted daughter. Estella is proud and haughty. She mocks Pip for his rough hands and coarse manners, making him feel ashamed of his humble background. Despite her cruelty, Pip becomes infatuated with her. Miss Havisham watches their interactions with a strange satisfaction, encouraging Estella to break Pip's heart. She has raised Estella to be cold and unfeeling as a way to exact revenge on all men for the betrayal she suffered. Pip continues to visit Miss Havisham and Estella, each time becoming more aware of his social inferiority. He dreams of becoming a gentleman to win Estella's approval. However, when he turns 14, Miss Havisham pays for him to be apprenticed to Joe as a blacksmith. Pip is disappointed but begins his apprenticeship nonetheless. During his apprenticeship, Pip's dissatisfaction grows. He is increasingly discontent with his life at the forge and longs for something more. One day, he receives astonishing news. Mr. Jaggers, a powerful lawyer from London, arrives and informs Pip that he has come into a great fortune from an anonymous benefactor. The benefactor wishes Pip to be educated as a gentleman in London. Pip is overjoyed and assumes that Miss Havisham is his benefactor, believing she intends for him to marry Estella. Before leaving for London, Pip visits Miss Havisham to thank her, but she neither confirms nor denies his assumption. He also says goodbye to Joe and Biddy, a kind and intelligent girl who helps teach him to read and write. Biddy warns Pip not to be ashamed of his origins, but Pip is already feeling superior and eager to leave his past behind. In London, Pip is introduced to high society. He lives in Barnard's Inn with Herbert Pocket, who turns out to be the pale young gentleman he had fought with years earlier at Satis House. Herbert becomes Pip's close friend and teaches him the manners and customs expected of a gentleman. Pip also meets Mr. Wemmick, Mr. Jaggers' clerk, who has a strict businesslike demeanor at work, but leads a cheerful and whimsical life at his castle home, where he cares for his aged father, known as the aged parent. Pip enjoys his new life, attending dinners, parties, and the theater. He spends money freely, often beyond his means, and accumulates significant debts. He becomes increasingly detached from his roots, feeling embarrassed by Joe's simple ways when Joe visits him in London. Meanwhile, back in the village, Pip's sister, Mrs. Joe, never fully recovers from a violent attack by Orlick, a malicious laborer. She grows weak over time and eventually dies, leaving Joe and the kind-hearted Biddy to mourn her passing. Pip, consumed by his London life, hears of his sister's death and visits home, feeling guilt and sorrow. Estella herself has been sent to London to be introduced to society. She attracts many admirers but remains aloof. Pip misinterprets Miss Havisham's intentions, believing that she is preparing Estella to be his wife. However, Estella is courted by Bentley Drummle, a coarse and unpleasant man from Pip's social circle. Despite Pip's protests, Estella decides to marry Drummle, telling Pip that she has warned him repeatedly not to love her. Heartbroken, Pip returns to Satis house to confront Miss Havisham. He accuses her of misleading him and of causing both his and Estella's unhappiness. Miss Havisham is struck by his words and realizes the extent of the pain she has inflicted. Overcome with guilt, she begs for Pip's forgiveness. As they talk, a tragic accident occurs. Miss Havisham's dress catches fire from the fireplace. Pip acts quickly, using a tablecloth to extinguish the flames, but Miss Havisham is severely burned. She later dies from her injuries, leaving her estate to various relatives and to Estella. Meanwhile, Pip's life takes a dramatic turn when Magwitch reappears. He reveals himself as Pip's true benefactor, having amassed a fortune in Australia after being transported there as a convict. Magwitch's return puts him in grave danger, as he is under a death sentence if found in England. Pip is conflicted. He is repulsed by Magwitch's criminal background, but feels a sense of duty and gratitude. Pip decides to help Magwitch escape. As they hide Magwitch, Pip learns more about his past. Magwitch tells of his association with Compeyson, a gentlemanly-looking swindler who betrayed him. Compeyson was the man who abandoned Miss Havisham on her wedding day, having conspired with her half-brother to steal her fortune. The revelation connects the fates of Magwitch, Miss Havisham, and Pip in unexpected ways. Pip, along with Herbert, devises a plan to smuggle Magwitch out of the country. They rent a small boat and plan to row him down the Thames River to a ship heading abroad. However, their plan is foiled when Compeyson learns of it and alerts the authorities. During the escape attempt, Magwitch and Compeyson struggle in the river. Compeyson drowns, and Magwitch is badly injured and captured. Magwitch is imprisoned and sentenced to death. Pip visits him regularly, coming to care for him deeply. In his final moments, Pip tells Magwitch that his lost daughter is alive and that she is Estella. Pip expresses his love for her, bringing comfort to the dying man. Magwitch passes away peacefully, knowing that his legacy lives on. With Magwitch's death, Pip's fortune is confiscated by the government. He is left penniless and burdened by debt. Exhausted and ill, he is nearly arrested and sent to debtor's prison. Joe, ever faithful, comes to London to nurse Pip back to health. Joe pays off Pip's debts and cares for him tenderly. Pip is overwhelmed by Joe's generosity and finally understands the true meaning of friendship and loyalty. After recovering, Pip returns to his village to seek forgiveness and make amends. He finds that Joe has married Biddy, and they are happily settled. Pip is genuinely happy for them and feels a sense of peace. He decides to join Herbert in Cairo, working as a clerk in his business. Pip works diligently, finding satisfaction in honest labor. Years later, Pip returns to England. He visits Joe and Biddy, who now have a young son named Pip. The child reminds him of his own innocent beginnings. Pip then visits the site of Satis house, now demolished, symbolizing the end of his old illusions. There, he unexpectedly meets Estella. She has suffered greatly in her marriage to Drummle, who was abusive and has since died in an accident involving a horse. Estella has changed. She tells Pip that her experiences have taught her to feel and to understand the pain she once caused others. She asks for his forgiveness. Pip and Estella walk hand in hand, leaving the past behind. The novel ends with the hopeful suggestion that they may have a future together. Great Expectations explores themes of social class, ambition, love, and personal growth. Dickens critiques the rigid class structure of Victorian England, showing how wealth and status can corrupt individuals and distort their values. Pip's journey from innocence to experience illustrates the dangers of false values and the importance of staying true to oneself. The novel emphasizes that true gentility comes from kindness, integrity, and humility, rather than from wealth or social position. Pip's ultimate realization that genuine happiness lies in sincere relationships and honest work serves as a moral lesson.